Hi, everyone. This is Chris Lee, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of the Launch School podcast. In this episode, I had a chance to chat with Sunny Beatteay, a senior software engineer at Digital Ocean and Capstone alum. This conversation was recorded a few months back in March 2020. Many of you who hang out in the Launch School chat room probably have seen his name around. Sunny's always amazing to speak with because he's so open and willing to share. And despite all his achievements, he has no ego, and I hope through this conversation it sheds light on the attitude and approach anyone at Launch School can take to reach their career goals. In this conversation, we chat a bit about day-to-day life at Digital Ocean, what projects he's working on, how he got promoted so quickly just 2 years in. And he even gave a breakdown of his salary progression from when he first joined to his post-promotion salary. We also talked a bit about his post-Capstone job hunt and how it takes luck, confidence, and preparation to land that ideal job. It's a great conversation. By the way, if you take time to leave us a positive review for us on either Apple or Google, it helps us spread the word. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a good review. Thanks, and I really hope you do enjoy it.
Welcome to the Launch School podcast, where we discuss education, programming, and how to build a rewarding career in software engineering.
Welcome to another episode of the Launch School podcast. Today with me is Sunny Beatteay, a software engineer at Digital Ocean and Capstone grad from about 2 years ago. Thanks for stopping by today, Sunny. How are you doing?
Doing great, Chris. How's it going?
Yeah, doing well. Just trying to survive the virus here, the coronavirus. We're in the middle of
Yeah.
it. How are you doing out in New York with the lockdown?
It's definitely a little tough, but I work at definitely a remote first company, so there's a little bit of a switch, but I've been able to get through it pretty well.
Yeah, I guess just no more free lunches in the office. Maybe that's the big thing.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the biggest one of the biggest perks that's been removed so far.
Do you want to give a quick intro about yourself and maybe a background real quick before we kind of get into your story and your journey, which is really, really interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I'll give a little synopsis. So 29 years old, live in Brooklyn, New York right now. I kind of was from Seattle, Washington beforehand, but I actually moved to New York about 4 years ago with my wife. Before kind of finding Launch School and switching into tech, I kind of bounced around a bit. I majored in oceanography at college at University of Washington. Then I went and did a year of AmeriCorps because I wasn't really sure what to do. Graduated in 2012.
Okay.
And then traveled a bit, traveled in Europe. My mom's French, so I spoke some French. So I traveled in Europe for a bit. Did a year of AmeriCorps just to kind of like putting off, trying to decide on a career. Thought about doing physical therapy while in firefighting for a bit. And then finally kind of bounced around until my wife was kind of like, you need to pick something. You need to really focus on something. And so, she's a tech field herself. And so she's actually the one who kind of introduced me to it. And so when she kind of applied the pressure to me, I was like, okay, well, I've been wanting to do tech for a while. I've seen like Silicon Valley and all those like kind of the TV shows, and I've met developers through her work. So I was like, let's try it out. Like I've been hearing more people switching in this career. I guess when I was in high school, I always thought like I couldn't do tech just because you had to be doing tech from like a really young age. And so I kind of gave up on that idea at first until I heard more and more people switching to tech. And so that's when I decided to switch, found Launch School, and that's kind of that's where we are now.
Yeah, that's great. And you found Launch School, finished Capstone about 2 years ago. So now you've been at DigitalOcean for 2 years, almost.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that experience been like? Sort of what's your day-to-day and technology stack that you use, or projects, things like that?
Yeah, I don't want to like overhype it too much, but I would say like being able to get DigitalOcean as my first job in tech has been kind of like pretty ideal. Just because there's a lot of things that I love about DigitalOcean, especially like in a job overall, but especially in a first job in tech. I guess just kind of go over DigitalOcean a little bit. Like a remote company, we do kind of infrastructure as a service, so similar to Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform. I work on the managed storage products team. So we're in charge of a lot of the managed storage products, like kind of what the name says. So object storage, block storage, databases, CDN, and we're actually going to do. We're working on static sites as a new kind of new product that we're rolling out soon. In terms of like how I enjoy DO, like it's great, like lots of freedom. Being since it's a remote company, you get to work. I work in the office in New York. There's a headquarters in New York, but my team now there's more people in New York. But when I first joined my team, I was the only person in New York. So all my entire team was spread out across the U.S. Like my manager wasn't even in the office, so it was definitely
So how's
a
the
bit of an
time zone work?
adjustment.
You don't have to work at 9 a.m., I guess, just whenever you want.
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined, I was like, I was gung ho, so I'd get in the office really early, like maybe 8:30, and like try to get my work done. But slowly over time, you kind of realize that no one's tracking your hours, and like you can get your work done at any time. So definitely, my start time has slowly drifted towards probably like 10:30 or 11 now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what projects are you working on? I mean, you said to manage a storage team. Are you allowed to say kind of what you're working on, or specifically, or not? Or like technology stack, for example, if people might be interested in that.
Yeah, I'll go over a bit what we do. So in terms of stack, my team works primarily in Go. So all of our services are kind of built in a microservice architecture. So all of our services are, or at least all of the new services are written in Go. And we run them on top of an internal Kubernetes cluster that is managed by the company. We use MySQL as a database layer. We use Kafka as a message broker. Some of our services use RabbitMQ as well, so it's kind of like the messaging layer. In terms of legacy, Theo is not the oldest company at all, but that's not the youngest too. So we're probably 7 years old, 8 years old. So we do have some legacy stuff. And for my team, particularly, our legacy is written in Ruby, which actually is great for me just because that's what I learned at launch school. So I think that's actually one of the biggest reasons they hired me, was because even though I didn't know Go, I knew quite a bit of Ruby, and so they kind of trusted me to learn Go. And they kind of like a lot of my first projects were actually handling the more legacy code written in Rails. So I was able to kind of adapt the architecture through that. And then in terms of the products that I work on, we have a product called Spaces, which is our object storage. It's kind of equivalent to Amazon S3, if people who know about that. We also have a CDN offering. It's kind of equivalent to CloudFront. And then the products that we've been working on most recently are databases as a service. So we offer managed databases to our customers. So right now we have Redis, MySQL, and Postgres. And then we're working on a new database provider that I probably can't say anything too much right now. I'm working on kind of the technical deep dive and proof of concept right now, because we're still in the discussion phase with the partner to establish a business partnership. But if that goes well, that'll be really exciting. I'll be able to reveal the name at a later time. But it's definitely a very well-known database provider. So that's one of the projects that we're working on right now. And the other big one that we're kind of focusing on is static sites. So offering a static sites offering similar to Netlify or GitHub Pages.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're sort of working on the infrastructure side, the tools and products that enable web development, right? And I think that's one level lower than what you would traditionally call full stack development. That's where you want to be, I think, right? At least you want to try to get to, because that's where really your leverage as a software engineer is really maximized. Now, if somebody asks you what you do, how do you describe that to, let's say, somebody who's kind of new to tech, not totally ignorant of programming, but there's this term, full stack development or back end development or front end development. How do you sort of describe what you do to someone who's asking you for some details?
Yeah, I mean, if people are looking for like the definitive term of what I do, I usually say I focus more on the back end. But I guess the nice way of putting it is like I'm a problem solver. So I have done some front end code at Dio, not very much. That's why I say I'm primarily back end. But yeah, I think Dio is kind of big enough to now where we definitely have teams that specialize in different areas. I think like startups, you might hear more of that full stack developer term kind of thrown around. Definitely at Dio, we don't really use that term like at all so much. I haven't really used it. I haven't really heard it used by people. it's typically more systems engineer, backend engineer, front
Right.
end engineer, kind of stuff like that. But yeah, I would say like my wife has worked at startups and definitely full stack where you're working on both. You're in charge of working on the front end, and then the next day you might get a task to work on the back end and like the back end API. So those kind of things, I think you hear more in the startup world where they kind of expect you to wear more hats.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that term is a little odd, and it really, yeah, you're a problem solver, right? You can work pretty much anywhere, and but you have certain preferences. Now, let me ask you this. I get asked this question a lot by people in earlier in the launch school curriculum. They always ask how do I get into a company like DigitalOcean if I don't have a PhD in computer science, or I don't come from this hardcore computer science background? Can I even get there? So, I think first of all, you got there, great.
Mhm.
But what's the profile of some of your colleagues? Are there a lot of bootcamp grads? Are there mostly CS majors? Do they all have PhDs in computer science?
I would say the breakdown. I haven't talked to, at least in terms of my team. My team primarily, I would say we have definitely some CS grads. I would say the majority actually. There's me, and I know two of my team. My team size is 5 people, and me and 2 other engineers I know do not have a CS degree. So actually, my team is more than half kind of self-taught. Oh, actually, I guess full disclosure. Actually, another launch school alumni is on my team, so we're both
Right.
from launch school. So we don't have CS degrees, and then my tech lead I think has a CS degree, and then a new hire we have I think has a CS degree. But I definitely know of other people in the company who have done boot camps in the past or have come from more self-taught, untraditional backgrounds. And yeah, like they're definitely. I would say I've yet to see someone that's graduated from a boot camp and this be their first job at a boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
I do know some boot camp grads at DO that are like senior levels, but they have been at other companies before here, so this wasn't their first company out after their boot camp.
And so I guess so the day to day and the project you're working on and the type of work that you do. Another question I get a lot from people from current students at Launch School is how does what they're learning now, which seems so focused on narrow, how does that map to sort of your job at DigitalOcean? Can you? I feel like I know the answer, and it's kind of setting you up a little bit, but like, I think people just want to hear it from like another source, right? Besides me. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest ones are just how to problem solve. I think it's one of the biggest things that Launch School teaches is like how to, the PDAC system, how to break down large problems into smaller subtasks and like just focus on those things. That was definitely one of the big things I had to really hone at DigitalOcean, just because when I came in, it felt like a fire hose. 'Cause, like my first tech company, my team was really small. There's only 3 of us, and one of them actually went on a vacation right when I joined, or soon after I joined. There's only 2 of us. We have these large tasks to finish up because it was like a product deadline soon. And so they're giving me all these tasks, like we need you to do these 5 API endpoints that do these certain things. At first, like it's just overwhelming. It's like, oh man, am I am I really the right person for this? Like, did I just have somehow sneak into this job and now I have to
Yeah.
actually like do stuff? But you have to just like kind of calm yourself down, go, and then if you have a system in place, you can kind of rely on that system to just break down problems. And once you kind of like research a problem a little bit, you realize what you first thought was like, oh man, it seems so grandiose and impossible. Like, oh well, if I just focus on this thing, which then leads to this other thing, and like over time, it just kind of builds up into like the system. So yeah, like problem solving is probably the number one thing I learned from launch school for this job. In terms of like technical things, there's obviously concrete technical things that I learned at launch school that helped me for this. Such as like just how the internet works, HTTP, networking. Luckily, like my company uses Rails, which we learned at launch school too. So that was like a very transferred over really easily. But in terms of like, I had to learn Go at DigitalOcean, which we didn't learn Go in launch school. But having gone through launch school curriculum, and you learned Ruby for the back end, you learned JavaScript for the front end. At that time, I had already learned 2 languages, so I knew that like, okay, learning another language is just figure out the syntax. You know what you need to do essentially, but you just need to figure out how this language does it. Like the syntax that this language uses to do it. And so, you like just learning all the fundamentals essentially. I guess it's like
Yeah.
the big logical push, like learn the fundamentals, which you gotta learn the fundamentals.
Right. And I think a lot of people get into our first course, 101, and just have a horrible time with it because it's so difficult to get through. But there are so many meta skills in that course. It's not just, we don't have a JavaScript track. So it's not just learning Ruby or JavaScript. It's learning how to learn your first programming language, learning how to learn a programming language, key concepts about these higher level programming languages that you need to just pay absolute attention to, like mutation of objects, right? Passing by reference or value. And once you can conceptualize these ideas in one programming language, they transfer really well to another language because then you don't have to build up those mental models anymore. It's just like a syntactical difference and remembering the sort of quirks or differences between these different languages. Um, so important. And I think this is why people have a hard time with our first course. But once you get through that, it really unlocks a lot of things, including learning, these more advanced, I should say advanced languages, but just different languages, right? That employers might demand. Um, Another thing I wanted to mention is this idea of sort of feeling like, even though you went through launch school and capstone and pretty rigorous training, you still are experiencing sort of this, oh man, can I do it? And it's you still have to learn, right? Like a lot of people think that a good training program is one that gives you all the knowledge necessary to do a work. That's just not true at all in our field, right? It's
No.
impossible. Um, and actually, what I always say is if you end up in a job where you know like 100% what to do, that's not a good job. That you're doing
No.
the same thing over and over. You have full control over it. We actually encourage people to not vie for those jobs, not apply for those jobs, right? So the reason why, at least in my opinion, why engineering is fun and interesting, and frankly, why the salaries are good, is that you're solving problems that are new, that you don't really know how to solve. And so the skill necessary to do that type of work is just in time learning, which is unlocked by fundamentals, right? Like there's this dependency. You can't just go and do it. You have to have some fundamentals. So I think you're experiencing all these things that we try to teach at launch school: problem solving, learning how to learn languages, learning how to unlock just in time learning.
Mhm.
And you're like experiencing that firsthand. Um, Another benefit of doing this well is that you have lots of opportunities, right? So I think you mentioned to me a while back that I don't know if you got recruited or got pinged by Facebook and GitHub, and the salaries that sort of they were whispering were quite high. Do you want to talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah. So all of that kind of actually stemmed from my capstone project. So the capstone project I did at Launch School was Conclave. So it was essentially kind of like a Google Docs, where it's a collaborative text editor, but we kind of worked in a decentralized system. So we built kind of a peer-to-peer system for that, and that was very intriguing to some teams at like one particular team at Facebook. So after I joined DigitalOcean, I got messaged by a team manager at Facebook, and I think he had seen our team's like case study for Conclave, and so they were actually doing something very similar, or like a kind of peer-to-peer kind of able to maintain state in a peer-to-peer system kind of thing for their VR. So I think it was like they were working on essentially the infrastructure for maybe Oculus or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he reached out to me and he wanted me to go talk to one of the engineers on the VR team. And so I was like, I'm not gonna pass up it wasn't a official interview or anything like that. So I was like, I'm not, and he was like, oh, you can come to the Facebook office, you can get lunch from our engineers. Like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to go see the Facebook office. And so, I went to the Facebook office, talked to the engineer. And it was interesting to see just how like transferable, different skills and just different skill sets are different companies. So, in Capstone, we learned about like decentralized state and like consistency and decentralized system for our little like web app, but that has implications for also much larger systems. So even though I've never worked on a VR system before, like the core fundamental things I was working on that were transferable to that team. So that's why they wanted to kind of
Mm-hmm.
meet with me and just like see, pick my brain essentially a little bit. So that's what the Facebook opportunity was. and it didn't really go much into an actual interview. But I know some people who work at Facebook, and total compensation there can go from like, I don't know, easily over 200K, and then even into 300K. Like that's you see like senior engineers who can easily make 200K
Yeah.
at Facebook.
We actually have
Um,
a Capstone grad who is on the Oculus VR team.
yeah, yeah, and I know he's making a decent amount of money over there. So yeah, that's definitely
Yeah, it's in a
that's great for
different.
him.
He's on the podcast too, so different episode.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. And GitHub.
Yeah, so GitHub, I interviewed with GitHub at the same time I was interviewing with DigitalOcean, and it's also actually very similar to it was all tied kind of to the Capstone project. So when I was in my job search for after Capstone, I gave a talk at a meetup about our Conclave project, and it was very similar to a different product that came out from GitHub around the same time called Teletype. It was like a collaborative editing mode on their Atom IDE. And so one of the engineers at GitHub was at my meetup talk, and I had no idea at the time, but afterwards he met up with me. He's like, "Oh yeah, I know Jason Rudolph was one of the main engineers who created Teletype." And I mentioned Teletype in my talk because it came out around the same time. And so the engineer came up to me, he's like, "Oh yeah, I know Jason. Like he's a great guy. I can give you a referral to GitHub if you're looking for a new position." And so from that referral, I was able to get an interview, and I did make it to the final round. And I stopped. I actually turned down GitHub after I got the DigitalOcean job, just because DigitalOcean was my first pick. But actually, the person who gave me a referral to DigitalOcean, he now actually works at GitHub, and I was talking to him about a year ago, kind of talking about his compensation, and he's just base salary. I think he's making over 200K. So there's definitely. I'm doing pretty well myself for a DigitalOcean, but there's definitely a very vast ceiling that people don't really realize, that there's you can go pretty far in tech.
I know, and I think this is one of the things I always try to convince people to think about, and this is why it's worth trying to maximize your potential, right? Trying to reach high. If you don't hit it, that's okay, but that it really unlocks a lot of things. And I keep using that word unlock, I know, but it does feel that way, right? It's sort of like once you cross that chasm, you're no longer vying for like jobs that pay 50 or 60. Instead, your opportunities are with these companies that are just, and salary to me, again, it's a reflection of the quality of job. It's not necessarily like we're aiming for a certain, salary number, right? But it just unlocks so many opportunities for you when you try to go there, as opposed to just settling for sort of the nearest opportunities around you, right? And that's one of the things I always try to encourage people to think about, especially if you've already found launch school. And again, people who find launch school, they're always like, we're always the last ones they find, so it resonates with them for some reason. And the message, right, the message learning something well. If you're already in that mindset, it shows that you have greater ambitions than just getting a job in tech, right? It shows that you really want to understand and learn things well. So aim high, right? And then what's the benefit, right? Because a lot of people will kind of always push back a little bit, and rightfully so. Everyone has different personal situations, but they always push back because, hey, if I live over here, I make less, it's totally cool. But yes, but right, there's just so many other opportunities that gets unlocked if you're able to just go to distance.
I mean, that's kind of like that was like the reason why I was definitely drawn to launch school, just because it was a very similar position for me. I first started learning to code January 2016, but I didn't do it through launch school. I first did Team Treehouse, I did lynda.com. I was doing all these different like tutorial sites, and I had no idea what I didn't know already. So I did like 6 months of that. I was like, oh, I'm totally ready to get a job now, and like I had no idea what I was like. It was you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And then so when I found launch, like I was looking at other possible ways to kind of leverage or kind of increase my portfolio worthiness. So I was looking at like certificates and boot camps. And I think like when I first saw launch school, I'm kind of the person that's always drawn to like the toughest things. Like in school, I was always trying to go for like the special class, like the high level classes, and like everyone's like, oh, it's it's gonna be really hard, just know it's gonna be really hard. But whenever people like tell me like, oh, it's gonna be really hard, I don't know, for some reason like it draws me more to it. And so when like the launch school's marketing is like, this is a very slow path. It's not easy. It's not for the absolute beginner. It's gonna take you a while, but this is gonna be the way to get you there. And even though like essentially you're saying don't come here unless you're really serious about it, like that was like definitely the thing that drew me to it, just because I've always been that kind of person to kind of go towards a harder thing, even though it might definitely not the easiest way of doing things.
Yeah, but the reward is better, right? If you aim
Yeah,
higher.
for sure.
And so, yeah, that's exactly right. I think this is why we have such a great community, because people who feel that way, they're drawn to this type of program. And there's a reason why launch school is like this. I don't know that there was like special, marketing target here. It's just like that's how I am too, right? Like that's a reflection of me as well. And I always think about launch school being something I wish I had early in my career. Like a curriculum that really just showed me the path, as opposed to like the easiest way, right? Um, so let me kind of go back to your story. You told me recently you got promoted. Congratulations. 2 years in,
Thank you.
promoted. That's not bad. What was that process like? Did you ask for it, or was it just kind of a part of an annual process, or what?
No, so that's definitely one like that's definitely something I learned. It's like definitely playing the game kind of thing when it comes to tech. So like when I first joined DigitalOcean, after a year, it's like it's been a year now. It's kind of like a milestone. Like what should I be kind of aiming for? And so I was kind of talking with my colleagues, and I was gauging how long had they been there, what level they were, how long did it take for them to get promoted, kind of stuff. And it was kind of interesting, just the disparity I saw. Like some people were able to get promoted within a year, or like within 2 years pretty easily. Some people had been in the same position for like 3 years, and they're all it wasn't like they were all staff engineers, and it just took like 10 years to get to the next level, just because that's how it is when you're super high. They were all kind of like my level, and it was interesting to see that the variance of like why was that person able to get promoted so quickly versus someone else. And the thing I actually learned from, or what I kind of gauged, was just that the people who were able to get promoted faster just asked for it. Like it was kind of a simple thing, but they were just asking for it. They're applying a pressure to the manager, and it's one of those things where I think tech usually is seen as a meritocracy, and I definitely believe it to a good point as a meritocracy. But there's still like the politics game you gotta play.
Sure.
And a lot of it just comes down to like just asking for what you want, and it can be intimidating.
So did you ask for it?
Yeah, after my first year, I had a performance review with my manager. After the first year, I was like, hey, I want to get to the next level. What do we got to do? And from there, we just kind of formulated a plan, and set some milestones. And it took a little while, just because DigitalOcean kind of changed up their performance review process. So it took a little longer, just because there was a transition period. But yeah, I had to, I asked for it. I demonstrated the work. I kind of created a case for myself, and yeah, it went through, and now I got promoted.
It's amazing how some of this advice is simple but hard, like just ask for a raise. Like that's hard, right? But it's simple advice but hard to execute. And I think sometimes too, like we look at these salaries that we get at launch school too. It's like, how do you get those? It's like, well, you have to be willing to not take a job that's lower, like turn down a 80,000, turn down a 120 to get that 135. It's like easy to say, really hard to do, right?
Yeah.
So follow up with that, with the promotion. Do you? And this is a sensitive question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, or we can deflect or something. But everybody wants to know, right? All the launch school people want to know. Are you willing to share your salary, and or the salary you got maybe in the beginning, if not your current one?
Yeah, I can kind of give you the process, I guess, like from when I first joined to now, if that's helpful.
Yeah, sure.
So when I first joined DigitalOcean, I was offered a offer letter for 145 base salary and a 5% bonus per year. I guess like that's what a lot of companies give out, a bonus per year. And so I guess the total compensation was around 152, but the base salary of 145. After the first year, I was given a merit-based increase of 5% to my base salary. So after the
Nice.
first year, I was raised to 152K. And then my second year now, I was promoted to senior engineer one, and I was given a 10% base salary raise. Also, my bonus went from 5% to 10%, which I didn't realize it was gonna happen. So it's kind of a nice added bonus. So now I make 167 with a 10% bonus. So I guess total compensation is around 183.
That's 2 years after Capstone.
Yeah.
And you were in launch school from start to finish for a year and a half?
Yeah. So I started August 2016. I started Capstone kind of around the same time the next year, so August or September 2017, and I got the job at DO March 27th, 2000.
Right, because your entire the fall cohort was the entire thing. So you started your job hunt like in January,
Yep.
and 2 months later started. Yeah, so that's pretty fast. I mean, 2016, not too much programming experience, and now we're like 180.
Yeah. No, that's a. I think you mentioned this before, but like I think I forgot what article you posted, but you mentioned that one grad had said that they had quadrupled
Oh yeah,
their
it was the
pre.
Thanksgiving article when I
Yeah,
was
and
like was
yeah,
thankful. Yeah.
yeah, and then one capstone grad had increased like quadruple, and that's like and that's definitely the same story for me. The best job I had before launch school was I was working as a rehab technician in a physical therapy clinic, making about $14 an hour,
Oh
and that was the
man.
last job I had before launch school. So like literally $14 an hour to 145K in like a little like 2 years.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. I want to read some notes. So we take notes on all our students. If you don't mind, I'll share some notes from when you joined. This is about 3 years ago. All
I
these
go for
notes.
it.
Okay. So first quote. I forget. I don't know who wrote this. It might have been me. Shows promise. I like his code for the most part, but he didn't test his edge cases too well, which is normal. So, I wanted to share that because I wanted everyone to hear that, like, even though we're pretty strict at launch school, right? And the reason why we're strict is because we're preparing you for something, right? We're preparing you for these job interviews, and I always want to make sure that like the experience that you get at launch school prepares you for it adequately, so that you don't feel that there's a big gap.
Mhm.
So this is not to pick on you, Sunny. This is definitely to show that even though you're a very successful software engineer, obviously well on your way to a great career, and obviously making a lot of money and all that. Still early some notes here. You weren't 100% perfect. Maybe 90+% for sure though. Okay, quote. Here's another one. Doesn't have a lot of work experience, but he did well on the guess a number and another exercise. His guess a number had an off by one error, which he should have caught, but he turned in his code too quickly. So these are little notes that we kind of keep. Do you remember anything about those exercises?
Oh, I remember that one very clearly. Actually, I think that was you gave that one to me, and yeah, I remember that one very quickly because like you pointed out the error, and I was like, oh man, that one like that was like I don't know, I definitely I was like it was very nerve wracking. I think it was like I think that was maybe my first assessment or like the one of my first
Yeah, that's the
assessments. So
first
like
one, I think. Yeah.
yeah, I was nerve wracked, like oh man, like it's your first time doing it, so like to that be my first assessment, and then I kind of have a big like a quote unquote big blunder in front of like the main instructor. I was like, oh, I was sweating bullets. So I definitely remember that one really well. In fact, actually, I remember it so well that I have a friend going through launch school right now, and when he was preparing for his 109 assessment, I gave him the exact same question because like you might get this because I got this, and make sure you don't get this error.
That's funny. No, we change up our questions, but yeah, we used to not do interviews at all. And well, what I realized is people got to the end of their curriculum, and some people do well, and other people would come back from their interview and say, "Oh, I got to ask this question." But like, that's great. That sounds like something that you should be able to do. And like, no, I just froze on interview. And after hearing
Oh
that,
yeah.
after a certain number of times, you're just like, you're not doing people a service by sending them out there. not giving them any exposure to this. So we just made a decision when we, revamped to launch school to add these interviews as early in the curriculum as possible because I want people to experience it. I want people to feel it, right? It's a totally different ball game. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, but being able to perform, right? Being able to perform with other people around. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult assessment for sure, but it will prepare you. All right, I got one more quote. This is about the internship, and we should talk about that next. But I have a note here that says currently spending 40 to 50 hours a week at launch school, so that's a lot of time. But starting a new front end internship soon that pays $500 a month, mostly volunteer position, but just wants to get some experience. And then I followed with, I think I wrote this. I think he has potential, meaning you. I think he has potential to do well if he doesn't get sidetracked by this internship. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit. What was that internship? Do you remember?
Yeah, there was actually two couple different times where I got sidetracked. There was one time, so the very first time I got sidetracked for a front position, it was with a studio, and I think this might have been the first time you mentioned it, or this might have been the one that you're talking about, or the first time I got sidetracked, which was there was my friend was a designer working at a design studio, and he was just like asking if I wanted any experience or like doing real projects. So like, oh, it's definitely. I forgot where I was exactly in the curriculum, but I think it's an issue that a lot of people go through when they go through the curriculum is you don't have an exact timeline of when it's going to end. And so like there's different spots in the timeline or in the curriculum where it's like, am I ready now? Can I get a job now? Do I have to like wait till the whole thing's over? And so I think I was like during a time I was a little more vulnerable and like, oh man, I've been in this things for a while. Hopefully like maybe I can get like some real portfolios like or real portfolio work, something like that. And so that's when I was talking with them. Then I was a little bit hesitant. So something I brought up to you, and then you kind of talked me out the first time. You're like, why would you do this?
Right.
This is this is like it sounds pretty terrible. Like in terms of an internship.
Yeah, because I can see your performance on assessments, right? I can get a feeling for your capabilities, and that just didn't sound like a good fit for you. So
yeah, so that was the first one, and like I think it was gonna be like you said, it's almost like a mostly volunteer based. It was meant to be like an internship, like an unpaid internship, quote unquote. I eventually turned that down just because I saw my blunders. You helped me realize the error of my ways. So I like, no, I'm not doing that. But I will say I'd say maybe towards the end of the front end portion, I was kind of another, I was very close to the end of the curriculum. And it was kind of another phase where I was a little more open to like sidetrack because like, oh, I'm almost done with the curriculum. Maybe I can try and find a job now. And there was another design studio, funny enough, next door to the other design studio that offered me the first internship. But this one was willing to pay me at least. And so the reason why I took that one was because I think like at this point I'd been at launch school for like close to a year now, and my wife was supporting us both by herself on our own income. So when she heard that I could potentially use the skill I've been developing for the past year to get some additional income, she's kind of pushing me towards that a little bit. And I think it's like something that a lot of students go through with launch schools. Like, after a certain time, if you've been in the curriculum for long enough, you might face some financial things, or like you might get tempted by like, the shiny penny on the side. Cause I've been doing this for a while. Maybe I can kind of exercise the fruit of my labors and get some money now. But it ended up being pretty miserable just because they had no idea how to use me. Like I was the first web developer who'd ever worked at a design studio, and it was mainly like a design studio for designers. Like they were usually just making signage and like physical design, but they're trying to transition to a web development firm, which is why they hired me, because they thought like I can bring in some different clients and that kind of stuff. It only lasted about three to 5 months, and by the summer they had no work for me, so they just kind of let me go. And I was so happy the day they let me go.
So if they didn't let you go, you might still be working there?
I forget exactly. So the thing is, like, most of the days, I literally had no work to do, that I would do launch school while I was there. So that's kind of the reason why I kept doing it, because I was essentially getting paid to do launch school.
Okay.
So that's why I kept doing it. But like it was to the point too where like it's kind of like a big juxtaposition of like that job compared to launch to like a job like Digital Ocean. I think it definitely really confirmed in me when you talk about having bad software jobs versus good software jobs. One of the things I hated about that job was they expected me to stay there till 6, even though I had no work to do. Like, I think the bosses are very traditional, and he expected the workers to, like, clock in at a certain time and clock out at a certain time, regardless of like what work was actually there. And so I'd be there for, there'd be weeks, like a week or more, where literally no work. And so I just do lunch for the whole time. It was just so boring. I was cramped in this little office doing, just doing lunch school. And like I'll go on lunch breaks and stuff, but it was pretty
And
miserable.
I would go as far as say this: most software development jobs are bad, and whatever you mean, however you want to quantify bad. But there's so much desire to like transition into software engineering, and you know, this is something people don't think about. Is that they always think that they can get their foot in the door and there's like this linear progression all the way up from your front end internship to DigitalOcean. It's just not like that at all. That's just not how progress works in our field. Maybe there was a time when that could have happened. Not anymore. There's just too many boot camp grads, and there's too many these kind of low level jobs for that to happen now. Most likely people just get sucked up into this churn of like low level jobs that it's kind of like dead end programming jobs. There's a ton of those. And so I'm glad that you dodged that bullet. But you bring up a really good point. Financial pressure, whether from yourself, from family, external forces, so hard to manage, right? And at that time, I think we didn't have a lot of data for Capstone. You were one of the earlier cohorts. So kudos to you for trusting us. But I think now it's a little bit easier, right? We're like, hey, check out all the data, check out the salary numbers. But it's still hard to turn down money, right? Even if it's a little bit of money, it's just so difficult. So I guess eventually, the choice is made for you. They let you go, and then you did Capstone, right?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I think my wife has turned into one of your biggest fans just because, I think it was her that had a lot of doubt. And like, it was me kind of convincing her, like, don't worry, it's only gonna be a little bit longer. I'll be able to get a really good job afterwards. And so, she was definitely trusting me a lot, and I give her a lot of credit for that. But I remember the day I got the DigitalOcean job, what they call me back, they give me the offer. I'm on the phone. My wife was like right in front of me, kind of, because she kind of knows it's gonna be the offer letter. And so she's like, how much? Like she's whispering, how much is it? How much is it? And I was still on the phone, but I give her the sign like 145, like the 145, and like her jaw just dropped, and she like started jumping around the apartment and stuff. And so it's like it's a very great memory to have. Like
coming from what, $14 an hour, something like that.
Yeah, and then having her kind of like having to like spend time convincing her, like it's gonna be okay, trust me. And then like finally having it like actually be validated, that was definitely a great feeling.
And here's another thing. I just updated the results page like last week to reflect this. I didn't know that people had this confusion, but we have 100% job placement rate in Capstone. Like it's not 80% or 90% or 70. It's 100%. Like everybody gets a job. We don't have 100% placement at 145, but we have 100% job placement rate. Like that's what it is, right? We're overshooting a lot of places, so that if you don't hit 145, you'll hit some other offers. And I want to maybe talk about your post-Capstone job hunt a little bit, because you went through a lot of companies, a lot of interviews, and a lot of offers. And so people always ask about these high offers that we get. And certainly, we have a formula, right? We obviously, there's no trick. You have to go through core. You have to master fundamentals. You have to be good, right? How do you get paid a lot? You have to be good. But there's another aspect to this, which is confidence, which is the confidence to walk away. And you walked away from a lot of offers. Well, not a lot, but you walked several. Yeah, especially coming. It's not like you're, financially independent or wealthy, right? Your first job, as you said, was $14 an hour, and then but you turned down multiple offers. And how did you can I just say you had a 120 offer that you turned down, or I think maybe a couple 120 offers that you turned down. How did you turn those down? Like why did you walk away from them when you didn't have the DigitalOcean offer yet?
I think there's definitely a luck factor to it. So not lucky in the fact that I got the job, but lucky in the fact that the jobs were not ideal for me enough to where I felt comfortable walking away. I feel like if it was a great company that was offering 120, like it would be much harder. But the first company I got, It was the first offer I got was 120, and that was actually a great feeling right at the gate to have the first offer be 120. I was like, oh my god, and I was like, that was definitely like it was probably the hardest time to turn down just because the
Yeah.
first offer 120. It's already kind of like in my ballpark of what I was wanting for. It's like, oh my god, this is it, this is it. And then I remember talking to Kevin. I think you commented before that Kevin's a little more of a hardball negotiator than most
Yeah.
people. But I talked to Kevin. I was like, "Oh, Kevin, I got this company is 120." He's like, "Good job. We can expect more," or
Yeah,
something along that line.
his negotiating strategy is literally don't say a number and like always go with more. I'm a
Yeah.
little bit more, like give and take, but yeah. So what happened there? Do you remember? Like, did you negotiate and they declined and therefore you walked away, or what was the process?
So I kind of so the company was a little odd in the fact that their main business was basically converting enterprise companies that ran on-premises hardware servers to the cloud. That was their main business, but they were creating a more software division of the company, and that's what I was being hired for. Was this kind of like more software-ish type of the side of the company that was essentially going to be like an upsell technique. So like they have these customers already that they're converting to the cloud, and having the software division would be an way of upselling, like, oh, we can then create products for you. And like I just got the feeling that they didn't really know, they didn't know how to run software, a company. They didn't know how to run a software company, because the interview was very easy. That was like the biggest red flag for me, was that the interview was very easy, and I was worried that like if it was so easy for me, I'd be kind of worried like if I don't know the quality of engineering people, the quality of engineering folks that would get there, and like am I gonna be able to get mentorship here? Am I
Mm-hmm.
gonna be able to really meet some super senior engineers here? Because if the bar is so low, that's kind of a little worrying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people will be like happy, but you're actually use that as a red flag, which is I think that's a really good intuition. I find that to be true as well. If it's too easy of an interview process, it's like, yeah, who else is working here, right? Am I gonna grow and learn?
Hmm. I asked to talk with some of their other engineers, and just like from there, it came kind of more and more downhill. Just because I asked these questions, like, that's a good question. I have no idea. Like that's essentially what the answers were, and it's like, yeah, it's not the best place.
You mean like what type of question? Like a programming question or just how the business works?
How the business work? I was like, what am I going to be doing? What's my what
Okay,
are my tasks going to be? And the guy's like, I don't know. That's
gotcha.
essentially the answer was.
Yeah, so a little bit of a organizational problems there.
Yeah, so that was the first offer. But I was able to, the nice thing was that they were nice in the fact that they didn't give me any like exploding offer. They were very lenient. They knew I had other interviews. They were able to like they let me like extend the deadline, and they were willing to like let me interview other companies. So I was very grateful for that. And so I was able to leverage that offer into other 120 offers, or at least one other 120 offer. But the issue with that company was more red flags. That company was kind of the opposite, where they gave me a 1 day exploding offer, and then they upfront said like, we're not going to negotiate with you, like the offer we give is and you have
Mm-hmm.
1 day to decide, essentially. And it was a pretty small startup too, so like even though I liked the team and like the company seemed promising, like it was just not enough to overcome, like it was very shady the way they did that.
Did your wife give
And
you any pressure? Was she like, why are you walking away from these 120 offers? Are you crazy?
actually, no, actually, she was pretty supportive. I think like once I got the first offer, she realized like, okay, you're doing pretty well. Maybe we can get some other ones. So
Okay,
I
yes.
think
Feel
she was definitely much more supportive.
Gotcha. So there's a feeling of like, okay, there's more offers down the line probably.
Yeah, I think she understood that like she trusts I can get these jobs, and she obviously she's my wife. She wants me to be happy. She wants me to have a great job, and so I was telling her kind of these red flags I was hearing. She's also in the tech world. She's seen companies like this. She's like, oh no, don't do that. Like that's a huge red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it was great having her expertise on my side, as well as you and Kevin. Like I feel like I had this whole corner of coaches just like telling me like, oh, this is
Right.
good, no, that's bad, this is good, this is bad.
That's
Yeah.
weird, right? Yeah, that 1 day is I remember that, and I think to this day, so it's been, a couple years, to this day I don't think we've had another one of those. So that is rare, and I'm glad that you walked. But just having the confidence to walk, like it's to walk away from 120, And I said most software jobs are bad, and I kind of insinuated the low paying ones are, but some high paying ones are too, right? So
Yeah.
you got to avoid those too. So I don't want people just to get a high paying job. Like if you were to ask me what to optimize for, it's always the good jobs. But the good jobs are very correlated with high salaries, right? But if there's a high paying bad job versus a low paying good job, I would say take the low paying good job. Because
Mm.
in the long run, your trajectory is going to be set at a different angle, and you're going to make up for it over time. So it's always about the good job, regardless of the salary. But again, such tight correlation between good jobs and salary, right?
Yeah, and the other point you made about like, how I was able to be confident. I mean, one of them definitely was having you guys in my corner. That was like having you guys kind of rallying behind me to give me confidence. That was one huge thing. Also, just like having, you know, I I wasn't burdened by like a timeline. Like I know I want to get a job as soon as possible, but I realized like, I've been having this great success so far. Like, I was able to get a couple of good offers. If I give myself just another month or two, I'm sure I can get another good offer. Like, I wasn't burdened by like scarcity mind for like, oh, this is the only jobs that are ever going to be there. Like, I knew I had other interviews in the pipeline. Just like, kind of forgiving myself. Like, you can let this one go. You don't have to get a job in the next 2 weeks. Like, see
Right.
how it goes. Kind of giving yourself some leeway.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's all comes from confidence. I mean, these high salaries is just the confidence to walk away from lower offers, because it's very rare for the highest offer to just pop up. It's that you have to walk away from the lower ones, and then having the confidence to negotiate and yeah, and step away and yeah, just keep interviewing too, right? So
Yeah.
all that is important. And then you ended up at DigitalOcean, which is your ideal company. You had a list, and I guess GitHub was in there too, but DigitalOcean won out. But you actually skipped a level at DigitalOcean, did you? When you first started?
Yeah, so I started DigitalOcean as a what they call IC2, so individual contributor two, or I guess also software engineer two. So yeah, we have a IC1, which I guess is usually reserved for new grads. So new people out of college will usually get hired as an IC1. And so yeah, I came in as an IC2, and I'm very thankful for that. That was kind of a crazy process. I think like I was just able. I think part of the reason was I was just able to do really well in the interview, because I remember during the interview they kind of threw a lot of like computer science stuff, which like lower level computer science stuff, which we learned. Um, like some of it we learned in Capstone, and some of it I learned just from reading all the other Capstone white papers. So
Mm-hmm.
when during my job search, I read the Workaholics job white paper that was all about multi-threading versus multi-processes, which was great actually, because that was like a lot of the questions I got was like from concurrency and parallelism. What are threads? What are processes? All these like kind of lower level computer science stuff, which I learned all from that white paper. So yeah, it was definitely one of the tougher interviews I had, but I think I was lucky in the fact that it was like my, I don't know, maybe 10th on-site interview. So like by that time I had quite a bit of experience, kind of learning the patterns with on-sites, kind of like knowing what they're looking for, how to kind of structure my answers,
Right.
and just like, this being my 10th one, I wasn't as nervous. Like,
Right. Practice, and yeah.
it,
Interviewing is a skill, right? You
yeah,
you
it
can get
is.
good at it. I feel like there's too many people that are just like, there's two types of people that I think it's the wrong approach. The first is I'm just gonna go interview without any preparation and just wing it, right? And just try to express enthusiasm and try to overpower people. For good jobs, you're not gonna succeed. For these high-paying, really good jobs, they're gonna really want to see that you know your stuff. The second type is where they're afraid to interview. They want to make sure that they want to pass every single interview. And I think that's
Hmm.
also the wrong approach, right? So both approaches you need to sort of meet in the middle a little bit, where you're afraid to interview at all. You will get better, especially this is advice for capstone grads, right? You will get better as you interview more, right? But don't interview too early, because then you're gonna get blown out of the water and feel demoralized. So there's that middle ground. But for most of our capstone students, they're more than ready to interview. They just have to understand that it's a skill that you can get better at over time as well, and not be afraid. to interview. Um, and that kind of reminds me too, like I see, I'm in a very kind of interesting spot because I see a ton of people across the country interviewing with companies, across the country, across the world, frankly, because we have people in Canada now as well, in Capstone. Um, and I see a lot of interview processes and employers. This is, I guess, not really to do with your experience specifically, Sunny, but this employers really need to improve their process, and so many employers are just like kind of winging it,
Hmm.
and so when you zoom in to one specific interview like yours at DigitalOcean, you may say, "Oh, I got lucky. I read Workaholic, and these questions are asked." But if you zoom out to the entire process, it's you've already gotten two 120 offers. So I mean, it's not completely luck either, right? So I think if you ask anybody who got an offer, it is the combination of like the employer's process and what and that just happened to match up. So it's lucky in that way. But at the same time, with enough preparation, you will find more matches. Yeah.
I think talking about your last point about like how I was able to skip a level, I realize now also too, one of the other reasons I was able to skip a level was like you said, I had these other offers. And so when I was talking with the recruiter about like, oh, the typical recruiter question is, are you interviewing, are you talking with anybody else? And so I was like, oh yeah, at that point I had already talked with GitHub. And then I also had a recruiter call with Google, which didn't go anywhere, but technically I still talked with them. So I still kind of answered the question. And so like, oh yeah, I talked with GitHub and Google. And so, having these other offers and then kind of name dropping some of the company I was talking with, I think that also kind of bumped up the level I was with, because I think they were able to see, oh, these other companies have validated him. We feel comfortable giving him like an IC2 position.
Right, especially if you did a lot of interviews. Yeah, and you know what? If they
Yeah.
didn't, and the offer is lower, and GitHub gave you a huge offer, I mean, maybe that would have changed things too. So you never know. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that they came in strong. Maybe we'll end with this last topic here, which is you are currently doing a computer science degree while you're working at DigitalOcean. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in learning, why did you decide to pursue a computer science degree? You already work at DigitalOcean. A lot of people will ask, why would you want to go get a degree? Because you already sort of met the goal of a degree. What was your thinking there?
Yeah, I would say there's two main points to it. The first being like coming from a non-traditional background, you typically hear or there seems to be a lot of high regard for computer science in the tech industry. There's still, I guess, people in the quote unquote old guard who can still only consider people with computer science degrees to be like true engineers, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of a curiosity aspect to, what's this computer science degree all about? So there was that aspect to it. And the fact that my employer was willing to pay for the vast majority of it, I figured like, if I can learn anything from it, it's worth it. It's affordable. I can get that. I can see what all the hype is about, and I can maybe, if there's all this theory that I wasn't able to get, because launch school is much more applicable. They teach you kind of the day-to-day skills you'll need in the job, which I think is more valuable anyways. But I wanted to kind of get that theory background too, because there was definitely some things I ran into at DigitalOcean that, having not encountered them in a more theory-based education, I wasn't really aware of what it was. So like some things like the thundering herd problem and split brain and all these kind of various
Mm-hmm.
computer science problems you might encounter or you might hear about in theory classes. So that was definitely something I was curious about learning. And the second part was just kind of more like uh, just wanting to pad my resume a little bit, just still being kind of new to the tech industry. I guess having that little badge of approval, like saying I have a computer science degree, was like I figured it would be a nice little pad to my resume. And the funny thing was, like, as soon as I put it on LinkedIn, like I wasn't even finished yet. I had still on LinkedIn it says, when are you going to graduate? So I put a year out, and even when I put that up there, it's saying I hadn't graduated yet. I was getting a recruiter in mail saying, "Oh, I'm very impressed by your DigitalOcean and your computer science degree." So I was like, it was kind of a bewildering. Like, I guess it's still like, people still look at this as like
How
a
far
badge
along
of
are you
approval.
in your degree?
I'm actually at the last class, one more
Oh, you're
class and
almost
then
done. Congratulations.
yeah.
So I think you're in a good position. I mean, having gone through core curriculum, capstone, and nearly done with the computer science degree. Any takeaways from sort of compare and contrast the two experiences? Any thoughts there that might help others?
Oh, launch schools by hands and away the much better. I
Really,
actually like
I didn't expect that answer. Like, this is not a setup question, right? Like, what's,
no,
yeah.
it's just like so a little bit of story is that I joined the Slack channel for the computer science degree that I'm in, and this is after a year and a half working at DigitalOcean. I've written some Medium blog articles, and so that like had gotten a little bit of buzz. And actually, one student in the Slack channel messaged me like because he recognized my name, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, are you the person that wrote this?" Like, "Oh yeah, like I'm glad you liked it." And I was like, "Yeah, I think I kind of introduced him to Launch School from one of those articles."
Hmm.
And he was going through the core curriculum. I was like, yeah, like the Launch School's curriculum just seems so much more structured and just more applicable.
Oh, this is the
Because
other student saying that? So he's going
yeah, this is a
through
student.
both as
This is
well?
yeah, so he's also going through both.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm not trying to like. I definitely say I will learn quite a bit. So there's a upcoming tech talk that I'm going to give at the end of April called "How Prime Numbers Keep the Internet Secure," and it's all about like the fundamentals of HTTPS and public key and private key encryption, and kind of like the a little bit like the algorithms that go into that, and like how the internet is actually kept secure. And I will say I learned all of that actually from one of my computer science courses. So I will not say, like, I'm not going to say I didn't learn anything. I definitely learned quite a bit. But when it comes to like day-to-day things, I would say working in my job on a day-to-day basis helped me much more completing the computer science program than vice versa. Like I would say there's very few things I learned in the computer science degree that I was immediately able to turn around and apply to my day-to-day job. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, computer science degree is always kind of hard because they're trying to prepare people for, maybe for some, an academic career in computer science, right? And others, sort of application. But even in industry, it runs the gamut in terms of, I mean, not everybody who's in a computer science degree goes on does full stack development, right? They do all kinds of, uh, there's software and everything, right? Your refrigerator and a printer. I mean, you can work on all kinds
Yeah.
of software. So it's tough when you are trying to be vague in your goal, right? Prepare somebody for, like, it's like a training program that allows you to become a baseball player, a football player, or a basketball player, versus like a training program that trains you how to be a point guard in basketball or something like that, right? It's like just targeted versus general. Um, and yeah, so for launch school, we're
Yeah.
definitely targeted.
I mean, that was my main criticism of not only like my current CS degree, but like my last degree too. When I graduated with oceanography back in 2012, that was my other criticism was it feels like they're trying to introduce you to everything that is in this field, and so there's very little specialization. But like specialization is where you tend to like get all the job skills from because they want you to the employer wants you to specialize in something so they can pay you for it. And so that's like, I've noticed that having gone through now 2 degree programs, that's like my biggest criticism of just I guess the traditional model is just like they're trying to expose you to everything, but at the same time, you don't specialize in anything. Like in my current program, they introduce you to 3 different computer languages. So like Python, C++, and Java. But it's only for 1 course each. So I've barely learned either of any of them. Like I only know some basic syntax for each one.
One course that's like a semester, or how long is a course?
So in the model that I'm doing it, like the program is actually kind of similar to Launch School, where it's self-paced. So you can take as long as you want with each class, but you just need to pass a test at the end, and that test determines whether you pass or fail the class. And so the class can be as long as you want. I would say they usually range like a month. Like I usually each month, each course I've done so far is a month, just because I having
That's
been on
not
the
too
job.
bad. That's not too bad. A
No,
month
it's definitely not too bad.
in one of these. I mean, there's boot camps out there that cover a language like JavaScript in a couple weeks or something.
Oh yeah, like
Especially for people like no programming background at all. Like just here's 2 weeks on JavaScript. Boom, you got it. Next.
No, that's too little time.
It's crazy, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's like my main criticism. But at the same time, like the theory, I would say there's definitely been some theory things that have been useful. So kind of like what I'm saying with the prime number stuff. But actually, one thing I wanted to kind of bring up is I think a lot of, especially like core curriculum and capstone people, they're uncertain if if they can compete in the job market with the skills from launch school. It's like they have all these bootcamp grads, computer science degree people. Like, am I really gonna be able to compete with those other people that are joining the tech field? Like, am I gonna compete with them for jobs? And one little kind of funny anecdote that I learned after joining DigitalOcean was that there had actually been another person competing for the same position as me who had a master's degree. And this is
In
unbeknownst
computer
to me at the
science
time.
master's degree or master's degree in
Yeah, in
what?
computer science.
Okay.
I think in computer science. And so this is after I got the job. I'm looking through Slack, and I found a channel where they had talked about some previous candidates who are looking going after the same position as me. And I noticed that one of them, they're talking about one of them that had a master's degree, and it's like they're kind of unimpressed by the fact that he didn't know, the difference between threads and processes and like these things that they would expect from a person with a master's degree. And here I come, no computer science degree, whatever, no job really from the tech industry at all, and I'm able to beat him out for this job. So I thought it was like a nice little that's something that a launch school can brag about, is they're able to compete with the best of them in the job market.
That's awesome. Yeah, exactly. I don't think we have to worry about bootcamp grads for the most part, right? I mean, there's good ones, of course, but our competition is for the most part experienced engineers, for these roles, or maybe in New York City, like NYU comp sci grads or something like that. So I think that's all the questions I had today. Thanks for first of all being willing to be so open. I know I put you on a spot a little bit there with the quotes from your early days, and but I just wanted people to see that, the bar is pretty high at launch school, but it's for a reason, right? When you finish, and one of the things I'm trying to do this season on the podcast is to interview people who have been working for a while. You've been working for 2 years. You're not just a recent grad who landed a job. You have been working for a couple of years, you're doing well, you're getting promoted, and you had lots of opportunities and offers. It's not just this, one, like, you got lucky, so we're talking to you, right? So, thanks for sharing your story. I think this is, hopefully it helps other people, give them some more confidence, and also just to show what it can look like if you can, cross that chasm. And it doesn't take too long, right? We're just talking about a few years for a great career, right? That's a great trade-off, I think, as long as you're not in huge financial trouble or something like that. But short term, long term.
I think 2 years might seem like, from when you first hear it, 2 years might seem like a long time, but in the long run, it's a blip on the radar. I'm gonna forget. I'm probably like 30 years from now, I'm gonna look back on these days like, oh, those are the good days.
Yeah, especially when it unlocks so much, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to unlock this really, really hard puzzle, and it's not 2 years just for some random goal, right? And like I always say, most programming jobs in tech you have to avoid, most, right? But it's worth vying for some of the good ones. So anyway, thanks for being on the podcast, Sunny. And I know you're super active on our forums, on our Slack forums, chat room as well. So, we'll keep in touch. Maybe we'll touch base again next season on a podcast. Just keep updated in terms of what you're doing and monitor your career.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great. Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Launch School Podcast. Check back for new episodes, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and review.